I never thought that something as simple and meaningful as building a greenhouse could turn into a full-blown war with the HOA. It all started when I decided to build a greenhouse in my backyard, not just for gardening, but as a way to honor my late wife, Sarah. Welcome to Karen Chronicles. Before we begin, please like the video and subscribe to the channel so we can continue creating even better content. Thank you so much. All right, let's get started. Sarah loved plants. She always dreamed of having a quiet place to tend to her flowers, where she could sip tea in the mornings and breathe in the scent of fresh blossoms. But life had other plans. Her battle with illness ended too soon. So after she passed, I made a promise. I would build the greenhouse she always wanted. I did everything by the book. I got the proper permits from the city. I ensured it met all zoning regulations. I was not violating any HOA rules. But one person hated the idea from the start, Karen, the HOA president. The moment I began assembling the greenhouse frame, I received a letter from the HOA. Your structure is not approved. The greenhouse disrupts the community aesthetic. If you do not remove it, you will be fined $500. I knew Karen was behind this. I had city approval, HOA approval wasn't required. The greenhouse was in my backyard, it wasn't an eyesore. Nowhere in the HOA rules did it state that greenhouses were prohibited. I ignored the letter and continued building. The very next day, I received another warning. Failure to comply will result in further penalties. I started to wonder, why was Karen so fixated on stopping me? As time went on, my neighbors started noticing the HOA's unreasonable actions. The greenhouse isn't bothering anyone. Karen is going too far with this. Why do we let the HOA control every little thing? For the first time, I wasn't alone in this fight. Neighbors began signing a petition demanding the HOA stop harassing me. They attended HOA meetings, questioning Karen's authority. Karen could feel her grip slipping. She knew that if she didn't act fast, the HOA would lose control over the neighborhood. I thought I was finally winning, but I underestimated Karen. At 3 a.m., I was suddenly woken by a loud crashing sound from my backyard. Metal clanking, glass shattering. I ran outside, and what I saw made my blood run cold. My greenhouse completely destroyed. Metal beams ripped apart, glass panels shattered everywhere. An HOA truck loading up the remains. I couldn't believe it. I shouted, "What the hell are you doing?" Karen stood there, arms crossed, wearing that smug smile I'd come to hate. "We warned you. Your structure was unsafe. The HOA has the right to remove unauthorized structures." I was stunned. The greenhouse was built legally. I had every right to have it. No city order required its removal. Yet, Karen took it upon herself to destroy something deeply personal to me. This wasn't about HOA rules anymore. This was personal, and I was going to make sure Karen paid for it. The sight of my shattered greenhouse haunted me. The very place I built to honor my late wife had been reduced to nothing but debris, all because of one woman's unchecked power. But I knew this wasn't over. Karen had made a mistake. A big one. I was about to uncover just how deep her corruption ran. As the sun rose, I combed through the wreckage. Among the broken glass and twisted metal, I found something odd. Crumpled papers left behind by HOA's demolition crew. It was a demolition order, supposedly issued by the HOA, stamped with a watermark that read, HOA official approval. But there was a problem. It was fake. I had seen official HOA documents before. This didn't match the standard format. The signature, scanned and printed. The watermark, a low-resolution copy, not the embossed official seal. And the biggest red flag, no actual city permit for demolition. The HOA never had the legal right to destroy my greenhouse. They had forged an order, thinking no one would look too closely. They were wrong. As I prepared my next steps, a neighbor named Bill, a former HOA board member who had resigned years ago, approached me. He had something Karen had left behind in a hurry during the previous HOA meeting, a personal notebook. I flipped through it, my hands shaking. Inside, I found pages of handwritten notes detailing HOA's corrupt activities. And there, in black ink, was my confirmation, a timeline of events leading up to the destruction of my greenhouse. Names of HOA members involved, their roles, and even estimated costs for cleaning up unauthorized structures. Notes about how to spin the situation if legal complications arise. Karen had been planning this for months. This wasn't a sudden decision. It was a coordinated attack to make an example of me so that no other homeowner would dare to challenge her authority. Before confronting HOA, I checked my home security footage. I didn't just have proof of the destruction, I had recorded conversations. At 2:47 a.m., 3 men wearing HOA vests arrived at my property. They cut the support beams, shattered the glass panels, and loaded the pieces into a truck. And then at 3:10 a.m., Karen herself appeared. Make sure this looks like a safety violation. If anyone asks, we had no choice. Well, remember, what if he asks for the paperwork? He won't. And if he does, we'll drown him in fines until he gives up. I clenched my fists. I had them. On record. There was no escaping this. As I gathered more evidence, I started putting together a list of HOA's major offenses under Karen's leadership. 1. Abuse of power. Karen used HOA rules as a weapon to punish anyone who opposed her. Homeowners who disagreed with her received mysterious fines. People who challenged her at meetings were suddenly accused of property violations. Those who supported her, exempt from fines. 2. Embezzlement. HOA funds funneled into her family business. Karen always pushed for higher HOA fees, claiming the money was needed for maintenance. But when I dug into old financial records, I found that HOA had been paying thousands of dollars to a company called Clearview Landscaping. Clearview Landscaping was owned by Karen's brother. Over the last 5 years, more than $80,000 had been paid to this company. The services included unnecessary maintenance that no one in the community had approved. Karen had turned HOA into her personal bank account. 3. Exploiting elderly residents and imposing bogus fines. One of the worst discoveries was how Karen targeted elderly homeowners. She sent fines to residents who didn't have the means or energy to fight back. Many seniors had paid hundreds, even thousands of dollars in bogus penalties just to avoid trouble. Some had even sold their homes because HOA fees had become too high. Karen's system was built on fear and intimidation. But now I was tearing it all down. I took all my evidence, the fake demolition order, Karen's notebook, the security footage, and financial documents, and prepared for battle. I wasn't just fighting for my greenhouse anymore. I was fighting to take back my entire neighborhood. Karen thought she could silence me, but I was about to make sure she never had power again. Karen thought she could get away with it. The fines, the threats, the destruction of my greenhouse. She had been abusing her power for years, using HOA as her personal kingdom, and no one had ever stopped her. But this time, she picked the wrong person to mess with. I knew that taking Karen down wouldn't be easy. She had controlled the HOA board for years, using her influence to silence anyone who challenged her. But now, I had something she couldn't ignore. A fake demolition order with a forged watermark. Karen's personal notebook detailing her plans to destroy my greenhouse. Security footage showing HOA board members illegally tearing it down. Records of embezzlement, HOA funds being funneled into her family business. The problem, if I was the only one speaking out, Karen would try to dismiss me as a troublemaker. So, I went door to door, talking to my neighbors, and what I discovered was shocking. I wasn't the only one she had targeted. Mr. Henderson, an elderly veteran, had been fined over $2,000 in the past year for landscaping violations that didn't exist. The Martinez family was forced to repaint their house twice in 2 years because Karen changed the approved colors. A single mother, Lisa, had nearly lost her home because of excessive HOA fees and legal threats. Karen had spent years using HOA rules to drain people of their money, pushing out anyone who didn't comply. I told them everything I had found. And for the first time, our neighborhood had something stronger than Karen's fear tactics. We had each other. On the night of the HOA general meeting, the room was packed. Usually, these meetings were small, with only a handful of homeowners attending. Karen preferred it that way. Fewer witnesses meant more control. But this time, almost every homeowner in the community showed up. Karen walked in with her usual smugness, probably thinking she could spin the situation. She sat at the head of the table, flanked by her loyal HOA board members. She had no idea what was coming. I stood up first, calm and confident, and placed a stack of documents on the table. Tonight, we're not here to talk about minor fines or HOA guidelines. We're here to talk about the criminal activity happening within this very organization. Karen's smile faltered. Over the past 5 years, HOA has embezzled over $500,000 from homeowners. The money we pay for maintenance, it's gone, funneled into Karen's family business. And I have the proof. I held up the financial records, then flipped through the pages of her notebook. Here are handwritten notes from Karen herself, detailing how she planned to illegally demolish my greenhouse, forge paperwork, and silence anyone who opposed her. The room erupted. You stole our money. This is fraud. We need to press charges. How long has this been happening? Karen turned pale. She looked around, realizing she had lost control. She stood up quickly, trying to regain her authority. This is all a lie. These accusations are baseless. If anyone should be fined, it's him for building an illegal structure. Oh, really? Because I also have security footage showing HOA board members illegally destroying my greenhouse at 3 a.m. under Karen's direct orders. And if that's not enough, I called the police. At that moment, 2 uniformed police officers stepped into the room. They had already reviewed the evidence I submitted. They had already seen the financial fraud. They had a warrant. Karen's face drained of color as one officer approached her. Officer Karen Mitchell, you are under arrest for fraud, forgery, and destruction of private property. The room went silent, and then an eruption of applause. Karen tried to fight back, but it was over. She had stolen from homeowners. She had abused her position for personal gain, and now she was being held accountable. As they cuffed her, I walked up one last time and looked her in the eye. You used fear to control this community, but fear only works when people stand alone. We stood together, and that's why you lost. Karen was dragged out of the room, screaming about how she would fight this and how this isn't over. But it was. With Karen gone, the entire HOA board was dissolved. New leadership was elected by actual homeowners, not Karen's hand-picked puppets. All bogus fines were dismissed. HOA finances were audited and stolen money was recovered. A new rule was passed limiting the power of HOA officers, so this would never happen again. As for me, I rebuilt my greenhouse. Bigger, stronger, and completely legal, this time without HOA interference. And every morning when I walk into that greenhouse, I know one thing for sure. No one, not even a Karen, can take away what's rightfully mine. The war is over, but the lesson remains. Never let one person control what belongs to many. With Karen gone and the corrupt HOA dismantled, our neighborhood had the opportunity for a fresh start. For years, we had lived under fear and control, dictated by someone who saw HOA as her personal kingdom. But now, we were finally free. But the real question remained, what would we do with that freedom? The first thing we all agreed on was this. We would never let one person have that kind of power again. So instead of reinstating a traditional HOA, we created a new transparent system, a community council, made up of elected volunteers representing all homeowners, not just the loudest voices. Transparent finances. Every dollar collected from the community would be publicly accounted for. No secret deals, no corruption. No unfair fines. Instead of a system built on punishing people with bogus penalties, we focused on helping each other. Instead of dictating how people should live, we focused on supporting each other. We don't need an HOA, we need a community. And that's exactly what we became. For me, the battle against HOA had never been just about rules or power. It was personal. My wife, Sarah, had dreamed of a greenhouse. I built it in her memory, only to have it torn down by people who only cared about control. But now, it was time to rebuild. Except this time, it wasn't just my project anymore. The entire neighborhood came together to help. Bill, the former HOA member, used his carpentry skills to help design a new, stronger greenhouse. Lisa, the single mother who had once struggled under HOA fines, organized volunteers to help with construction. Mr. Henderson, the elderly veteran, donated materials he had been saving. Everyone pitched in, and when it was done, it was bigger. It was more beautiful. And this time, it wasn't just mine. Instead of just being a private greenhouse, it became a community garden, a place where neighbors could grow fresh produce, a peaceful retreat where anyone could come to relax, a symbol of what happens when people unite instead of fight. It wasn't just a greenhouse anymore, it was a victory. With the old HOA gone, something incredible happened. People started helping each other. Instead of fining people for minor violations, we helped them. Instead of punishing elderly homeowners with fees, we created a support network to assist them. Instead of enforcing useless rules, we built something that truly mattered. The community garden was just the beginning. Together, we started 2 new initiatives. 1. The Children's Fund. Karen's old HOA had drained people financially with unfair fines. Now we use that same energy to do something good. A fund was created to help struggling families cover school supplies, sports programs, and activities for kids. Volunteers offered tutoring sessions to help children succeed. We built a small outdoor play area near the greenhouse, funded entirely by donations. Instead of punishing people for not following arbitrary rules, we lifted each other up. Under Karen's rule, seniors in our neighborhood had been some of the hardest hit. Many had been forced to pay ridiculous fines. Some had been pressured to sell their homes due to increasing HOA fees. Others simply felt isolated, without a real support system. So, we changed that. Volunteers checked in on elderly neighbors regularly. We set up a grocery assistance program for those who couldn't drive. We offered to do basic house repairs for free. No more HOA harassment over property violations. Instead of making life harder for people, we made it better. 1 year after Karen's downfall, our neighborhood was unrecognizable. No more ridiculous fines, no more corrupt leadership, no more fear. Instead, we had a thriving community garden where everyone could contribute, a support network for families and seniors, a neighborhood where people actually looked out for each other. Karen had spent years trying to control this community. We took it back, and every morning, when I walk into the greenhouse and see neighbors watering plants, kids playing, and seniors enjoying the fresh air, I know one thing for sure. Karen may have torn down the first greenhouse, but she'll never destroy what we built together. The war is over. The community has won. Karen's reign over the neighborhood had ended in the most poetic way possible, exposed, humiliated, and convicted for her crimes. The court had no sympathy for her. Fraud, forgery, destruction of private property, and embezzlement. Sentenced to 5 years in prison. Fined nearly $500,000 in restitution to the community. Lost her home, her assets, and her reputation. For years, she had used power to destroy others. Now, that power destroyed her instead. But while justice had been served, the real tragedy wasn't just Karen, it was her family. Karen had never been alone in her house. She had a daughter, Emma. Emma had always been quiet, always staying out of her mother's business. She was nothing like Karen, a kind-hearted young woman who had never used her mother's influence for her own gain. She never attended HOA meetings. She never tried to defend her mother's actions. She had watched everything happen in silence, but when Karen was sentenced, Emma's world fell apart too. She lost her home, she lost her financial security, she lost her mother to prison. Instead of bitterness, she did something I never expected. One day, as I was tending to the community greenhouse, Emma showed up. She was holding a pair of work gloves. "I want to help." I raised an eyebrow, expecting some sort of hidden agenda. "Help with what?" She hesitated, but then spoke with genuine regret in her voice. "Everything my mother did, I can't change it. But maybe I can do something good now. I don't want to be like her. I want to be better." I studied her for a long moment. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for the chance to earn it. "All right," I said, handing her a shovel. "Let's get to work." 4 years passed. Emma had become a part of the community. She worked harder than most, never asking for anything in return. She helped expand the garden. She organized donation drives for the Children's Fund. She became someone we could rely on. Then one day, Karen was released from prison early. Reduced sentence for good behavior. No money, no home, no family left waiting. Karen Mitchell, the woman who once ruled this neighborhood with an iron fist, was now a homeless ex-convict. For months, she didn't come near the community she once terrorized. Then one evening, as I was watering the garden, I saw her familiar figure standing at the entrance. She looked different, thinner, more fragile, No longer the powerful, untouchable HOA dictator, just an aging woman with nowhere to go. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, her voice quiet, "but I need to do something good. I don't want to be remembered for what I was. I don't have anywhere else to go." The old me would have laughed, turned her away, made her suffer as she made so many others suffer. But I wasn't the old me. And I remembered something my wife, Sarah, used to say. The best revenge isn't punishment, it's creating something better than what they tried to destroy. So I handed her a rake. "Then start here." Karen stared at me in disbelief, then slowly took the rake, gripping it tightly, as if it was the first real chance she'd ever been given. Karen never tried to excuse what she had done. She worked silently, cleaning up the very land she once tried to control. She repaired benches in the garden. She watered plants she once tried to erase. She built instead of destroyed. Some people never forgave her. Some never spoke to her. But others saw the change. The broken woman who had finally learned what power should have been used for, helping, not controlling. She never regained her old life, but maybe she found a better one. Years later, as I stood in the greenhouse, the one Karen had once destroyed but now helped care for, I realized something. She had lost everything, but found purpose. The community she tried to control became the only place that accepted her. And in the end, the thing she feared most, losing power, was the very thing that saved her. I looked around the thriving garden, the families, the children laughing, the elderly residents sitting peacefully on benches Karen once tried to remove. She had failed to break us. And that was the greatest victory of all. The war was over. The garden had won. The story of the HOA battle is not just about corruption, abuse of power, and resistance. It is also about forgiveness, redemption, and the strength of a united community. We often think that justice means punishment, but true justice comes from rebuilding what was destroyed. When the main character chose not to seek revenge against Karen, but instead gave her a chance to rebuild her life, it was not weakness, it was strength. There are 3 key lessons we can take from this story and apply to our own lives. 1. Unity can overcome any injustice. Karen once controlled the entire neighborhood, making people live in fear. But when the community came together and stood as one, her power collapsed instantly. This shows us that one person can be oppressed, but a united community cannot be manipulated. 2. Kindness is more powerful than revenge. When Karen lost everything, she could have lived in resentment. But instead, the very community she once ruled over became the only place willing to give her a second chance. This reminds us that forgiveness is not just for others, it is also a way to free ourselves from hatred. 3. The true value of a community. When the corrupt HOA was dismantled, the neighborhood did not fall into chaos. Instead, it thrived. They didn't need strict rules and punishments. They just needed people who truly cared about each other. This proves that a strong community is not built on rigid laws, but on trust and mutual support. In the end, as the main character's late wife once said, the best revenge is turning what they destroyed into something even more beautiful. That is not just a philosophy, it is a way to make the world a better place.